It's 2:14 in the morning on the Alaska Highway, somewhere between Watson Lake and Whitehorse, and the thermometer bolted to a truck stop signpost reads -51. Inside a sleeper cab parked at the edge of the lot, a driver is asleep under two blankets, breathing slow, comfortable. 15 minutes ago, a small heater under his bunk was humming along, pushing warm air into the cab, holding the temperature at a steady 20 degrees. Then, without warning, it stopped. No alarm, no crash, just silence. And in that silence, a clock started running that this driver might not survive if he gets the next hour wrong. Here's what almost nobody outside trucking understands. At 50 below, the biggest threat to a sleeping driver isn't the cold pressing on the glass. It's the failure of a device roughly the size of a shoebox, a diesel-fired bunk heater, and a decision, made hours earlier, to trust it alone for the night. So why would an experienced driver bet his life on something that small? Why not just leave the truck's massive main engine running all night, like every other rig in this lot, each one trailing its own ribbon of exhaust into the dark? What actually failed inside that heater at 2 in the morning? And once the warmth is gone, and the cab starts sliding toward the same 51 degrees below zero sitting outside the glass, what does he do in the next hour that decides whether he wakes up in the morning or doesn't wake up at all? Let's rebuild this night from the beginning and find out. Before we get into the cab, if you like watching how ordinary people outthink extreme machines and extreme weather, subscribe. It helps this channel keep finding stories like this one. Now, back to the cold. 9 hours earlier, the sun is already down. This far north in January, daylight lasts barely 6 hours, and by mid-afternoon, the world has gone the deep blue of permanent twilight. Our driver pulls off the highway into a truck stop that is really just a cleared gravel lot with power pedestals, sodium lights, and a dozen rigs already parked for the night, engines idling, steam pouring off their stacks in perfectly straight columns because there's no wind to bend them. He backs into a spot near a power outlet and does something most of the other drivers around him aren't doing. He shuts the main engine off. That decision is the hinge this whole night turns on, so it's worth understanding why he makes it. A truck's main diesel engine, left idling all night, burns roughly a liter of fuel every 10 minutes just to keep itself and the cab warm. Real money, night after night, month after month, for a driver who's paid by the load, not the hour. It also means 14 hours of engine wear for 0 kilometers driven. So on nights that aren't at the absolute edge of what a truck can survive, experienced drivers reach for a smaller tool, a bunk heater. It's a diesel-fired air heater, about the size of a shoebox, tucked under the sleeper, that draws a trickle of fuel from the main tank, ignites it in a tiny combustion chamber, and blows warm air into the cab, using perhaps a tenth of the fuel idling would cost. Plug the block heater into the pedestal to keep the main engine's coolant warm from the wall outlet. Run the bunk heater to keep the cab livable, and you've solved the whole night for the price of a cup of coffee. Tonight, the readout on the pedestal reads -51. This is right at the edge of what most bunk heaters are rated for, and our driver knows it. But he's run this exact heater through colder nights before. It's newer, well-maintained, cleaned 2 weeks ago. He makes the call every experienced driver eventually makes on a long enough winter. Engine off, block heater plugged in, bunk heater on, blankets ready as backup. He eats something hot, checks that his phone and a spare battery are tucked into the sleeper close to his body. Because cold kills lithium batteries almost as fast as it kills people. And by 10 o'clock, he's asleep. For 4 hours, it works perfectly. The heater's fan runs at a low, steady hum. The cab holds at 20 degrees while outside the glass the world sits at 51 below. This is the strange, deceptive comfort of extreme cold trucking. You can be in a t-shirt while surrounded on every side by a temperature that would put you into hypothermia in under 15 minutes if that thin metal wall wasn't there. Then, at 2:14 a.m., the hum stops. Here's what's actually happening inside that little machine, because it isn't one dramatic failure, it's usually one of 3 quiet ones. The heater's tiny fuel line, separate from the truck's main lines and far less insulated, can gel or ice even when the main tank is treated, because it's thinner and more exposed to the cold air blowing directly beneath the truck. Or the exhaust outlet, a small pipe venting the heater's combustion gases, can ice over from its own condensation in extreme cold, choking the unit until its safety sensor shuts it down. Or the igniter coil, caked with a season's worth of soot, simply can't get hot enough in -51 air to light the fuel at all. Whichever it is, the result is the same. A small red error light blinking on a control panel the driver won't see for another 20 minutes, because he's still asleep. This is the part of the night that should terrify anyone who's never experienced it, and it's exactly why the smartest drivers never fully relax. A parked truck with no heat source loses warmth fast. Cab temperature can fall several degrees every few minutes once the heat source is gone, faster near metal surfaces and windows. And the cruelest trick cold plays on the human body is that you don't necessarily wake up feeling cold. You feel comfortable, then drowsy, then you drift deeper into sleep exactly as your core temperature starts its slide. Hypothermia's first symptom is often not shivering, but a false, sleepy warmth that keeps you from doing the one thing that would save you: waking up. He wakes up anyway, not from the cold yet, but from habit. Years on this route have trained him to half surface every couple of hours on the coldest nights, almost without meaning to. He notices two things in the same second. The fan isn't humming, and his breath is starting to fog in front of his face inside the cab. That second detail is the alarm bell. Warm air holds moisture invisibly. The instant you can see your own breath indoors, you know exactly how much heat you've already lost. Now the clock is genuinely running, and every choice in the next few minutes matters. His first move isn't panic, it's a habit built from repetition. He doesn't fumble in the dark for the heater controls first. He reaches for the main ignition. This is the payoff for a decision he made 9 hours earlier, and probably hasn't thought about since. The block heater, plugged into the truck stop's power pedestal all night, has kept the engine's coolant warm even while the engine itself sat off. That's the entire point of a block heater. It means a cold-soaked engine at 51 below, which would otherwise refuse to turn over, or turn over so slowly it can't fire, starts almost like it would on a mild day. He turns the key. The big diesel engine catches, coughs once, and settles into a working idle. Heat that would take 20 minutes to arrive from a stone-cold start begins reaching the cab in 5. While that heat builds, he isn't just sitting still. He cracks the window a fraction of an inch, the same habit he'd use with the bunk heater running. Except now it matters even more, because a cold-started engine can run rich for its first few minutes, and he doesn't want exhaust finding its way into a sealed cab. He pulls on the jacket hanging by the bunk, not because he's freezing yet, but because putting on a layer before you're cold is always smarter than trying to warm up after you already are. And he checks the heater's control panel, which is now blinking a fault code he recognizes from a similar night 2 winters ago, an exhaust blockage warning. He doesn't try to fix it in the dark at 51 below. That's a job for daylight, gloves, and a mechanic's bay, not for a half-asleep man in a t-shirt at 2 in the morning. Tonight, the small heater's job is simply over, and the big engine takes the shift instead. Within 15 minutes, the cab has climbed back through the teens toward 20 degrees. His breath stops fogging. He checks his phone, still alive, thanks to being tucked against his body all night, and sends a short message to another driver he knows is parked 2 rows over. More habit than necessity. Heater died. Running the main engine now. All good. It's a small thing, but it's the same instinct that makes ice climbers check in by radio or backcountry skiers travel in pairs. Out here, someone else knowing your situation is its own kind of safety equipment. He doesn't go back to a deep sleep after that. He dozes, checks the gauges every so often, watches the clock crawl toward dawn with the big engine's familiar diesel rumble underneath him now, instead of the bunk heater's quiet hum. It burns more fuel than he planned to spend tonight. He'll fill up an extra time this week because of it. That cost is nothing compared to the alternative. By the time gray light starts creeping over the mountains around 6:30, the temperature outside has crept up to a relatively mild -44. He climbs down, breath instantly turning to ice fog, and does the walk-around every driver does before pulling out. Tires, which have gone stiff and flat-spotted from a night sitting still, will thump for the first few kilometers before rounding out. Exhaust stack clear, fuel lines intact. Then he pops the small access panel on the bunk heater and finds exactly what the fault code predicted. The exhaust outlet packed solid with ice, built up drop by drop from its own condensation until it choked itself shut. A 5-minute fix with a heat gun back at the shop. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that makes headlines. Just a small machine that quietly failed, and a bigger machine, plus a driver who'd planned for exactly this, that quietly picked up the slack. This is the part of extreme cold trucking that never gets talked about. It isn't really about surviving one catastrophic night. It's about redundancy, stacked in layers, so that when the first system fails, and eventually, on a long enough career, something always fails, there's already a second system standing by that doesn't care that the first one quit. The block heater plugged in just in case. The main engine that can restart cold because it was never allowed to go fully cold. The phone kept warm against his body instead of on the dash where the cold would have killed its battery hours ago. None of these individually saved his life tonight. Together, they're the reason a failed $30 sensor inside a shoebox-sized heater turned into an inconvenience instead of a tragedy. He pulls back onto the highway a little later than planned, coffee in hand, heater, the big one now, blasting warm air through the vents. Behind him, the truck stop empties out one rig at a time, each one trailing its own ribbon of exhaust into a sky just starting to turn from black to blue. Nobody who receives his load today will ever know that at 2:14 that morning, a small red light blinked on in the dark and a chain of quiet decisions made hours earlier was the only thing standing between him and real danger. That's the part of this job most people never see. It isn't about being tough enough to endure -50. It's about being paranoid enough, hours in advance, to build a night that can survive its own machine breaking, and calm enough, when it actually does, to reach for the backup instead of the panic button. If this one kept you watching till the light came up, hit like. It tells me you want more of these. And I'm curious, if that heater had died on you, alone, at 51 below, would you have known what to reach for first? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe if you're not already, because next time we're going even colder. Stay warm out there.